This is a presentation of Northeast Streaming Sports.
If you like the sweet science, get ready to talk boxing on the Gloved Fist podcast with top boxing writers Frank Latirzo and Jack Hirsch. Frank, a former amateur boxer out of Philadelphia, writes for NY Fights and can be seen on the Boxing Channel. Jack, an amateur boxer who competed in the New York Golden Gloves, was a 6-term president of the Boxing Writers Association. And now, here's Frank Latirzo and Jack Hirsch.
And we're back. Welcome to Glove Fist. My name is Frank Latirzo, former writer, full-time observer, wannabe fighter, joined by former 6-term president of the BWAA, Jack Hirsch. Jack, this was a big weekend for the guys at you to go to all the dinners and the awards. Not too much happened over the weekend, so we're going to have you start off with that. And unless you have to talk about Adrian Broner, then you can do that.
Yeah, there's some fights we're going to have to talk about. I've had a hectic few days as far as boxing goes. It went back to last Thursday, the Boxing Writers Association of America. I'm still very actively involved in planning the dinner. And we honored our fight of the year, Naoya Inoue. The great Japanese fighter who some people feel is the best in the world, pound for pound. Your favorite broadcaster, Frank, Timothy Bradley. I kind of like Timmy. Let me tell you what I liked about Timmy. As soon as he walked in the door, he greeted me. I didn't think he remembered me. And I took him backstage to see his award. You know, we had our photo taken. And nice guy.
Right, I saw.
Might not like his terms of the stab, jab, and all that. And
Jack, but you've never heard me say, I don't mean to interrupt you, but you've never heard me say he doesn't know what he's talking about. I value his opinion. Bradley knows what he's talking. I don't like the lingo that he makes up. I think he tries too hard, but I've never said he doesn't know boxing, because he does.
Oh, no, absolutely. And it was the 99th annual BWAA dinner. Next year's the 100th anniversary, and we're thinking of bringing back all living past fighters of the year. You know, and having really a tremendous.
How many would that be, Jack?
Oh, I'm not sure. I didn't look up, but there would be a good number of them if you look the last couple of decades. And how many fighters repeat winning the award? It's hard to believe, Frank. The great Sugar Ray Robinson only won the Fight of the Year award once. Willie Pep never won it. Roy Jones never won it. Everything has to fall into place. You need a big year. For example, the year Roy Jones beat James Toney, you'd think he'd be a lock to win the award. That's the same year Foreman knocked out Michael Moorer. So the sentiment went towards Big George, even though Roy Jones had a much greater performance than Foreman had.
Doesn't Ali hold the record, Jack? Ali won it 6 times, right?
No. Ali has it 3 times. 3 times is the record. No one's won it 4 times. You know, Ali, Mayweather, Pacquiao. We have a fight of the decade.
I'm thinking Ring Magazine Fighter of the Year.
Right. And as far as the fight of the decade goes, Roy Jones did win fight of the decade. He just never won fight of the year. That's kind of bizarre, right? Mayweather won the fight of the decade award the last decade, even though he only fought 10 times, because no one had a body of work that really stood out. In the decade before that, when I thought Mayweather did arguably deserve it,
but Pacquiao edged him out.
And then from Thursday night, I left Friday morning to the Hall of Fame in Canastota. And we could debate all day, Frank, who belongs in the Hall of Fame, who doesn't. But what I found interesting, Frank, of all the Hall of Famers that they had, usually the one that goes last, you kind of think of as being the main event in a certain sense to close the show. And Ricky Hatton closed the show. But Ricky Hatton was very funny. That may have factored into it. His speech had people laughing in stitches the whole time, and he seemed to be enjoying himself. But you look at the class of Hall of Famers, And I'm not saying they were in a worthy class, Frank. Diego Corrales, Michael Mora, Ricky Hatton. What I'm saying, it wasn't a strong class of Hall of Famers compared to other years. That's what I'm trying to say. And we can debate back and forth. Does Hatton belong in the Hall of Fame? You can make arguments both ways. My argument could be it's not the American Hall of Fame. If we lived in the UK, Frank, you and I, we might think Hatton was a great fighter that he'd belong in. I mean, the same thing. Some people have criticized Barry McGuigan getting in the Hall of Fame, but look what he meant to Ireland. Look what he meant, in that part of the world. But if you're just looking,
he has the one historic victory over Pedroza.
Right, but if you like Michael Moore, I don't think of Michael Moore as being a true Hall of Famer. But let me tell you the controversy. But I'm not saying he doesn't deserve. I'm not saying that at all. If you look at his accomplishments, let me tell you what bothers me about the Hall of Fame. This has nothing to do with how it's being managed, because no matter who the administrator was, this would stand out to me. Women's boxing historically hasn't been strong. I realize there have been pioneers like Jane Couch out of the past, etc., etc. But outside of maybe a couple of fighters, maybe even outside of Christy Martin, who really paid the dues in the ring and would fight on a steady basis on big shows, you see women's boxing being given, the same stage as men. The amount of women that got in, there were 3 women that got in this year. And I did a podcast. I was a guest of Bobby Cassidy Jr.'s. He had a podcast, and he asked me to talk about Jerry Quarry. Do I think he belongs in the Hall of Fame? And when you look at how relevant Quarry was, and he's not in the Hall of Fame, and a no-name woman who hardly anyone has heard about, like an Anna Torres, for example, is in the Hall of Fame, you kind of wonder. I mean, I understand if you break it up into a specific women's category, and even the non-participants, you look at certain of the names like the writers who are in there, and a Jerry Quarry isn't in there, a George Chavallo isn't in there.
Well, Jack, let me ask you this. Since it is Hall of Fame weekend, and Quarry is a very popular fighter, let's debate that. Do you think it sounds to me like you think he belongs in the Hall of Fame. I'm not going to say you're wrong. What's the best case for him to be in the Hall of Fame, in your opinion? Because I was asked to write an article about this a few years back regarding making a case for Jerry being in the Hall of Fame. And Jack, I held off on it because Jerry Quarry, as we both know, during Ali's exile, he was the most popular boxer in the sport. I really like him, but I held off because I wasn't sure. So give me your case for it.
He was extremely relevant for a full decade. And if you
67 to about 75, right?
When he fought a draw with Floyd Patterson. That's
okay. Fair point. 66. Okay.
Before the WBA heavyweight tournament, he fought a draw with Floyd Patterson. And look at the guys he beat when he beat them. Okay, too. Don't tell me what happened afterwards. Buster Mathis was favored to beat Quarry. Buster Mathis was one of the top heavyweights in the world who lost only one fight to Smoke.
Only one fight. Right.
And in the 11th round, he didn't get wiped up. He gave Frazier a heck of a good fight. And then you look at his big ones. Mac Foster, at the time Quarry beat him, he was 24-0. He was considered the hot heavyweight out there.
All knockouts.
You look at Ron Lyle. People felt Ron Lyle was on his way to winning the heavyweight title. He was a destroyer. And look what
21-0, 19 knockouts.
And look at what he did, and he beat him after. Just wins like that Ernie Shavers taking out in one round. And, and fights in between, like knocking out a decent heavyweight and a Jack Bodell in one round. And the Floyd Patterson fights are underrated. You could argue both fights could have gone either way. I never saw the first fight in its entirety. But the bottom line is he decked Patterson twice, and it wasn't a disputed decision the first fight. By all accounts, the draw was fair. And in 1966, Floyd Patterson was still good. Floyd Patterson would later go on beating Oscar Bonavena. He had a lot left. And then he fights him in the WBA heavyweight tournament. He knocked him down a couple of times more. And I had it scored a draw, that fight, meaning it could have gone either way. The win over Thad Spencer, when he did it, Spencer just had beaten Ernie Terrell.
He was the number one contender.
Yeah, but after Quarry beat these guys, they weren't, some of them got better in time. Shavers got better, had a lot left, we saw afterwards. Lyle had a lot left. Spencer basically took everything out of him. And, he had a little blip against George Chuvalo. That was a little bit of a fluke. I was at that fight, He did get knocked down, just one of those things. He got up from the knockdown and took a knee and wanted to take a 9 count, which is what fighters did at the time. And then when Zach Clayton waved his hands, it's over. Quarry jumped to his feet like, what are you doing? I think he just got lost in thought. He just had a concentration lapse, nothing more than that. And the loss to Jimmy Ellis was a reasonably close fight. And we later learned he had a bad back. Maybe he shouldn't have been fighting. Maybe he wouldn't have beaten Ellis anyway. I mean, I'm not saying he would have. And then there's Ali and Frazier. He never would have beaten Ali and Frazier. And then the one guy he would have beaten now and then, if he fought him 10 times, he would have beaten him 3 times, I believe, is Kenny Norton. Because he had the style. And I could tell Quarry was kind of at the end of, I don't want to say the end of his prime, but he was past his prime when he fought Norton and still gave him a terrific fight.
Jack, he had basically retired, and he was in a bar when he was notified about the offer of that fight, and he had 12 days to train. He didn't think he was going to fight again. Remember, he was really down after losing the rematch to Frazier. So, okay, that's your case for him making it in. Really good wins.
Let me just say
popular, relevant.
Of the most popular heavyweights in history. One of the most popular was Jerry Quarry.
Okay. Now, here's the argument against him, but I have thought about it. Would you agree his biggest fights were the 2 Ali fights, the 2 Frazier fights, and the Jimmy Ellis fight?
They asked Quarry that. And he said, look, if I lost to Ron Lyle, I would have been history. If I lost in the WBA heavyweight tournament, I wouldn't get to Ellis. To me, it's the same argument you're making that people make against LeBron James being the greatest of all time. Stephen A. Smith uses this. Well, he's 4-6 in finals. But if he got eliminated in those 6 years in the finals early on and he was 4-0, is that more impressive than being 4-6? And the answer is no.
Jack, but you didn't let me finish. Okay? I just asked you, were they kind of his biggest fights that he's remembered for? I think it's pretty much most likely. Okay.
Not the Ellis fight in particular.
But it was a title fight, Jack. He only had 2 shots at the title. That was the first fight. If he wins that fight, it changed everything. But my point, let me finish. My point is, as you said, he had the cracked vertebrae. It was close. The Ali and Frazier fights, look, as good as Jerry Quarry was, and he was outstanding, they were both all-time greats. And if you go back and if you look in the history of the heavyweight division, most of the time, because I've done this, the top 2 or 3 heavyweights of each era make the Hall of Fame. Ali, Frazier, and Foreman are a given. Bo, Lewis, Tyson, Holyfield, there's 4. In this era, we're going to have Usyk, probably Fury, and Joshua. People will argue about Wilder. So could you make a case that Quarry was the top 3 of the era between, say, 66? That's Sonny Liston's now no longer in the conversation. 66 to 75. Could you make that case? I think there's a case that could be made, and I don't think it should be held against him that he could not beat Ali or Frazier because they're 2 of the top 8 greatest of all time.
Well, let's look. You said something, Frank, just now that's very thought-provoking. I didn't give it any thought. Look at all the heavyweights who weren't champion, who are in the Hall of Fame from the past. Young Stribling, Tommy Gibbons. Those guys never won. Oh, you know who got inducted? Louis Angel Firpo. Compare Quarry's career to Louis Angel Firpo. Louis Angel Firpo had arguably the most sensational moment
Right.
in boxing history when he knocked Jack Dempsey out of the ring. Okay? Take away that one knockdown, that one moment. Would his name even come into the conversation, Frank?
You know, Jack, I haven't looked at his record lately, but he is basically known for Firpo, and so I've seen some people compare him to like an Oscar Bonavena type fighter.
But Bonavena, yeah,
you know, strong, crude on a given night. Like Bonavena had Frazier down twice, just like Firpo had Dempsey knocked him out of the ring. Yeah, there are heavyweights in there that don't belong.
Frank, Quarry would get the big wins from time to time. Bonavena didn't. Bonavena just fought very gallantly. He was tough. Frazier couldn't get him off his feet. Kudos to him. He did a great job, and he nearly beat Frazier in their first fight when Frazier was young on the way up. Bonavena was young himself. But Quarry would get these
Quarry way above Bonavena, Jack. Way above Bonavena. What's his signature? What's his best win? Zora Foley?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to find it exactly. If you want to tell me Ernie Terrell belongs in the head of Quarry, okay. I can be okay with that, but
only because he won the title, Jack. That's it.
Right. Harry Wills is in the Hall of Fame. Deservedly so. Dempsey never gave him the opportunity. He was a perennial number 1 contender. He belongs in more than Jerry Quarry. I'm not going to argue that. Like I said, young Stribling, Tommy Gibbons never quite made champion. The other fighters as well, if you look carefully, didn't quite make heavyweight champion. But it's what it is.
And then guys that win the title get in just on one fight.
Frank, my argument isn't that Quarry belongs in necessarily matched up against men, especially men at lower weight division. You look at the amount of women that get in, and they're given equal billing as the men. Like even the Boxing Writers, the Fight of the Year award, on the cover of our program was Amanda Serrano and Inoue. And I just feel Inoue has accomplished so much more. No disrespect to Serrano, who's been wonderful for women's boxing and is a classy individual on top of it and a very good fighter. But we're talking about Inoue. The men's path is so much harder, and it's not the fault of the good women boxers because they don't.
It's just not deep.
Competition. It's not deep. It's not their fault. But the bottom line is, what are we going to be, rewarding, them on this? This isn't about equal rights in society, Frank. It's not. It's about reality. And so the amount of women that wind up getting in the Hall of Fame, and then you get the Jerry Quarries, who are left out. Something.
Let me run, Jack. Let me run one more by you because this is a weekend where there's not a whole lot of great things going on. Here's one I've thought about also, and I'll make the case for him. And I'm not saying that he belongs, but here's the case. I've seen Jimmy Young's name bannered about. And if you look, Shavers, he fought him in his 10th fight. Got stopped in the 3rd round. They fight a year later. It's a draw. I saw the fight. Jimmy Young clearly won the fight. So in the ring, I think he has a win over Shavers. He
Okay.
beat Lyle when Lyle was good 2 out of 2 times.
Yeah.
He beat George Foreman. I think he edged out Ali. Some people don't because of him ducking out of the ring. But I'm sorry, I never saw Ali look that bad. It was more than him not being in shape. And then I also thought that Jimmy Young got hosed against Ken Norton. If you look at those 5 guys, Jack, he was in the ring, and you could actually say, other than the first fight with Shavers, nobody kicked his butt. And how many guys have a list of bodies like that? Now, what hurt Jimmy Young was after the Norton fight, he got out of shape. He wasn't dedicated, and then he was happy being a trial horse. But if you go by who he fought, when he fought him, how hard he was to fight, how nobody wanted to fight him, and some of the wins and near misses he has, I think he belongs in over Ingemar Johansson.
Let me tell you, Frank, if Young had gotten the decision over Ali,
He's in.
Personally, no, but I'll be honest. I thought Ali won the fight, okay? Because Young kept ducking his head out of, outside the ring. To me, you do that, you're avoiding a fighter's attack. So I think the guy on the offense is, even if the ref isn't calling it a knockdown, the guy is scoring big time on you, forcing you to duck yourself out of the ring. You're putting yourself in a bad hole in that round when you deliberately do that to avoid an attack. I understand CompuBox had Young way ahead, punches landed, but it didn't take into account that tangible. I thought he clearly beat Ken Norton. Had he gotten the decision over Ali, which, most people felt he should have, had he gotten the decision over Norton and the Foreman win on top of that, and the couple of Lyle wins and, et cetera, yeah, he's a Hall of Famer. It just shows you what a thin line it is, but no one is giving Young any consideration, and maybe we should give him a little bit of a peek. And Young probably shuts down Jerry Quarry and beats him decisively if they went.
I think Jimmy Young would decision Jerry Quarry. Bad style for Quarry.
Exactly. There would be a terrible style for Quarry. But you want to know something funny, Frank? Imagine they were young men, and Young, after those great performances with Foreman and Ali fought Quarry. Quarry lived on fights like that to upset the apple cart. When you think, oh, Young has the star, Young's going to beat him. Imagine that they fight in Madison Square Garden and Quarry somehow rises to the occasion and he beats another guy he's not supposed to beat.
Yeah, Jack. Jimmy Young is a tough case. And here's the other thing that no one speaks of. All the killers he fought, the only time he was stopped, he was stopped 2 times. Shavers and Cooney, but Cooney was cause of a cut. Shavers had him hurt and in serious trouble. He only stopped 2 times, and really only 1 time if you take the cut out. With all those killers, Foreman didn't put him down. Norton couldn't put him down. Ali couldn't put him down, and Lyle couldn't put him down. So, Jimmy Young's another case, but the kids look. I don't want to say the kids. The writers look at the 1-loss record, and it hurts them. But it's an interesting debate, Jack. I'm sure there's some other guys out there that are on the fence.
Ernie Terrell would deserve serious consideration. I know his WBA heavyweight title wasn't, considered a real title at the time. But if we're going to call fighters like Tim Witherspoon a world champion, because he held a WBA heavyweight title, Terrell deserves to be called the same when you think of it. Of course, he wasn't. Ali was a champion at the time. And I'm going to tell you this, Frank. Considering Ali was at his peak when he fought Terrell and really hated Terrell at the time and wanted to damage him as much as possible, how many heavyweights in history could have given Ali as good a fight as Terrell? I know Ali won big. He won 13 of the 15 rounds. But Terrell hung in and would land a jolting hook from time to time and, would have Ali holding on.
Jack, he did fight Ali in what most people believe was his prime. As you said, it wasn't a close fight, but he did go the distance. But he also had that height, that reach, that style that could be tough for a guy like Ali that lived on his jab. It'll be interesting. Let me ask you this. Do you think down the road, like we see that Firpo just got in, do you think, I don't think Jimmy Young ever gets in, but do you think there's a shot that Quarry down the road, one of these young writers comes along, really does his homework and makes a case, and then maybe after we're long gone that Quarry gets in?
Quarry hasn't been on the ballot. That's what the problem is. So the voters don't have a chance to vote him. And that's what people don't understand with the whole thing. You got to get on the ballot. You got to be in it to win it, in other words.
Right.
Quarry hasn't been on the ballot. And listen, we both like Jerry Cooney personally a lot. Jerry's a great guy, but please, I don't want him getting in ahead of Jerry Quarry. I don't think Cooney is a Hall of Famer, period. You know, unless we take the fame aspect. You can make an argument to anyone. If you say, as Don Majeski would say about Cooney, well, he was maybe the most well-known, relevant heavyweight of his era in a sense, you know?
For about 2 years.
Right, for whatever. But his name was always charismatic, magic, this and that. He was a famous heavyweight. It's called Hall of Fame. You could spin things however. And then there's another school of thought with Hall of Famers, Frank, and you can't have it. Now I'm going to criticize Frank Laterzo, who loves belts. You say, well, they hold a sanctioning body belt. One of Laterzo's favorite fighters. Can you make a case from Frank to get in the Hall of Fame? He fought this past weekend. He lost Adrian Broner.
Oh, my favorite fighter. Well, he did win 4 belts, Jack, but Adrian Broner was on the trajectory to maybe get in years ago. No case. No case.
But if you go statistically, Frank, if let's make believe something's funny like this. People don't know anything about boxing. You get a jury who wants to do their homework, and they see, oh, Adrian Broner, 4 world titles. Could you imagine Broner sued to get in the Hall of Fame, and they took it in court and actually got him in base, 4 world titles. There's your evidence. But getting off the Hall of Fame here, so Broner fights Blair Cobb for Don King. And I'm going to tell you something. Don King's 92 years old. Promoted a show in Miami. It wasn't a bad show, but he lost his good share of money on it. And Thursday night, I got to hang out with Bob Arum, age 92, at the cocktail party. And Arum promoted a show in New York Saturday night. So both of them promoted shows over the weekend.
It's amazing.
92 years old.
Amazing.
92. They're not enemies anymore, but they were shows that caught the attention of the boxing public. Arum with his young prospects, King with a decent main event, Broner against Blair Cobb. That was actually a decent main event. It's not a pay-per-view fight, but it's the type of fight we'll sit down and watch, and it would be interesting. And Adrian Broner loses, and what can I say? Do you think he overachieved or underachieved or did or whatever, Adrian Broner?
He clearly underachieved.
But he got 4 belts. That could be his argument.
Yeah, but we both know that he was never really the best guy in any division he fought. But the kid had talent, potential, gifted, looked a little Mayweather-ish on the way up. But just the one thing that Floyd has and his creed that nobody lives by. And when we talk about his greatness, the thing that maybe stands out the most about Floyd to me is the guy was in shape for 20 straight years and never got out of shape.
Dedicated. That's the point I tried to make about Mayweather. You could feel there were greater fighters than him, but he was dedicated. And the thing about
never out of shape in 20 years.
Mayweather was never put in a spot. And had he fought a little better level of competition, he may have had to come back from a crisis. Like, let's say John Scully, a guy who I have tremendous respect for. In fact, I accepted on his behalf the Good Guy Award because last Thursday he had one of the boxers he trains fighting in Montreal. John Scully went online, and he likes Mayweather a lot, but he said the Tommy Hearns fight would have been an absolute nightmare for Mayweather because of the style, an absolute nightmare. Mayweather was never forced to do what Sugar Ray Leonard did, come from behind. We'll never know for sure could he have done it. In all probability, he couldn't have done it the way Leonard did because he didn't have Leonard's punching power. That's something we know, that Mayweather at best would just be a moderate puncher at best. Not really. And Leonard at best could be a devastating puncher. But in a fight in which Mayweather would be losing on points and his opponent wouldn't be wilting at the halfway point, and Mayweather was forced to take the initiative and take chances, we'll never know for sure how he would have done. But Mayweather won his fight on large part. He outlasted guys. He was in such
But
great
Jack,
shape.
you know what? You know what I wonder sometimes? Leonard was losing to Hearns, comes back and wins, shows his greatness. Usyk was losing to Fury and pulled the fight out just when it looked like things were gone. Does that give fighters a lift? Do we look at them being better than they are, that they come back from adversity compared to, like, let's just say Crawford? Crawford's never had to come back from adversity because he is dominated so heavily that nobody can hang with him or stay with him to push him to that point. Sometimes I think when you're too dominant, it hurts you.
Well, a guy like Terence Crawford's never gone back to his corner at the end of the 8th round and been told, you're losing this fight. You really got to turn it around. Crawford,
Why? I think Bomac said that during the Porter fight, Jack. Not that he was losing, but he says you got to pick it up and get it over with.
And even I was in Las Vegas for the Porter fight, and I had Crawford up 5 rounds to 4, 1 point at the end of the
That's how
rounds.
I had it.
And I'm thinking to myself as the rounds are going by, this is a close fight, and I picked Crawford by a late round knockout, but there was nothing. But he wasn't really softening Porter up to the naked eye. I obviously he was, but I wasn't seeing it. And I'm thinking, when you use the term, a good term, separation. When is a fighter going to get separation? And sometimes the rounds are going by and he's not getting separation, and you kind of like wonder, is he going to get that separation? But you got the feeling with Crawford, even in the Porter fight, there's such a level of confidence, even though we might think time is running out. You could give him as little as 2 rounds left, and he feels, I'm going to turn the switch on now. And
you did have the feeling that it could end at any moment. But I think sometimes when guys are just so dominant and they never have to show that grit, I think sometimes it's used against them. And people say, well, they didn't really fight anybody because they never had to dig down, where we saw Leonard do it. We saw Ali do it. We saw a lot of the great ones do it. And I think sometimes when guys are real dominant and they don't have to do it, I mean, that was held against Roy Jones for a long time too. And I think sometimes those guys are penalized. And to get back to your thing about Jerry Cooney, I will say this. If we're going to go by the level he fought, like when you use the Ali Terrell example, I do think that even though Shavers knocked him down, I actually think that Cooney may have given Holmes, when he was in his prime, his biggest scare. And I don't think Holmes was ever better or more purposeful during a fight than the night he fought Cooney. And I think that night Cooney was clearly the second best heavyweight in the world. And had he been in there with anybody else but that Holmes on that night, he probably wins.
Yeah, you can make a valid argument for that.
That's his highlight.
Yeah, but I can say, I could use this argument too. When Galata first fought Riddick Bowe is riding high, okay? Riddick Bowe is considered by a lot of people the best heavyweight in the world. Galata lost twice by disqualification, but he beat Bowe up twice. I could make that argument too, and no one's talking of Galata getting in the Hall of Fame.
Well, nobody's talking about Cooney getting in either. I'm just saying for the one fight, he was really Hall of Fame material, but he doesn't have he doesn't have the legacy or the resume to get in.
Yeah, I mean, listen, he fought a terrific fight against Holmes, and it's how you it's kind of how you bounce back from a defeat too. Jerry Quarry was known for bouncing back from defeats. He'd lose. It would be discouraging, but he would always seem to bounce back and get a big win for the most part. And Cooney, he fought an outstanding fight against Holmes. In the losing effort, he wasn't ahead on points. But how did he bounce back from it? He never really bounced back. He was never the same afterwards. He got discouraged, and
other things are going on in his life too that have come out since then.
That's his fault, though, with the other things. But it's good he cleared it up. Jerry is a great guy. Jerry's a Hall of Fame person. Hall of Fame, a terrific fighter who's a Hall of Fame person. Okay. That's more important than any getting into any museum. I mean,
and again, Jack, it's funny. He also had the bad luck of coming up against one of the all-time great heavyweight champs in his prime.
But the part of it, you make choices in life, and you got to live with the choices. And Cooney could have stepped in and demanded. When his managers were arguing, Mike Jones and Dennis Rappaport. The late Mike Jones, told me the story that Dennis Rappaport wanted Cooney to fight Mike Weaver for the WBA heavyweight title. Mike Jones was the one who wanted to go after Holmes. And Victor Valley, reportedly, and Cooney, they went along with Mike Jones. And instead of fighting Mike Weaver. And Mike Jones's logic was this: even if we lose, we still win because we're going against the best. Weaver's not the best. That was the logic. Cooney probably knocks Weaver out. And then
Cooney's a fast starter, Weaver's a slow starter.
Right. And then he fights Holmes after that in the unification fight, and Holmes beats him. Okay? Holmes probably beats him worse than he did if that happened, because Cooney would have been such a celebrated athlete knocking out Mike Weaver. The focus wouldn't have been there. His way of thinking, I got to the mountaintop, and now I'm going to reinforce it against Holmes. So I don't think you necessarily would have seen the same good effort out of Cooney. I mean, the same.
I'm not sure I agree with that, but he wouldn't have beat Holmes, Jack, because I think it could have gone the opposite too. He gets the title. He gets a taste of it, but he knows that Holmes is the man, and that's what he knows he can't be recognized as the champion until he beats Holmes. So I don't think he rests on his laurels if he gets Weaver out in 2 rounds. Going back then, Jack, I could see the point of both Jones and Rappaport. Rappaport to me seemed like maybe he wanted him to gain the experience to become the best fighter he could be. And Jones was like, this guy Weaver can punch. What if he catches him? All those millions are gone now, which, you fight Holmes and you lose. Nobody's going to call you a stiff because you got beat by Larry Holmes in the 13th round.
Frank, well, you know this all too well. Certain great prospects, you could afford to not chase the money immediately because you're pretty confident no one's going to beat them because you have a truly gold chip prospect. Cooney was never that. Anyone Cooney would fight who could punch a bit posed a real risk to him. Okay? Certain fighters, we talk about Terence Crawford on the way up. You're not going to get a no-name beat Terence Crawford. It's highly unlikely, a Roy Jones. So you could wait a little bit longer with those guys before getting them in the ultimate fight. And speaking of Crawford, you mentioned never being tested. Do you think the fight with Canelo becomes a reality?
Jack, I don't know. I really don't know. I go back and forth. I think it's all up to Canelo. And as we've said on this show before, they throw him $150, $200 million. How does he turn that down?
They're going to throw it to him, Frank. I heard, my source told me on the Fury Usyk fight, the Saudis lost $27 million. That was the loss. And they can afford to, and then he also told me they could afford to keep losing 27 million over and over and over. So, the Saudis apparently are here to stay, and they love boxing. They love boxing. They're going to give us the best fights. They're going to make it so lucrative that no one's going to turn it down. Now, if anyone's going to turn down the mega crazy money, I could see it being Canelo. But where's Canelo?
Because he has so much of it.
Right. What is Canelo going to be so sensitive about his legacy? He's going to fight for 30 million instead of 150 million because he's scared to go in with Benavidez or Crawford. I can understand Benavidez. He feels, he's too big after the weigh-in. But what's his excuse about Crawford? Is it the embarrassment of losing to a smaller
To
guy?
lose, Jack. As Joe Bergman said, he if he wins, he gains nothing. If he loses, boy, that would not look good because then he'd be remembered for losing to Mayweather early and Crawford late. They'd be the bookend fights of his career. People would think about. That'd be hard for him to overcome.
No, but Joe, we don't look at Canelo Alvarez as being on track to being an all-time great. Maybe when his career's done, we'll acknowledge him as such. He's had a great, great career. Some guys we look at as having great careers, but not being all-time greats. And right now, Canelo's in that category. I mean, but Terence Crawford, he beats Canelo, and if he does it decisively, now, Frank, we start comparing him to the all-time great fighters.
If he beat Canelo, yes, he's right up there with Leonard Hearns.
Exactly. I mean, how are you gonna tell me that the Oscar De La Hoyas, the Felix Trinidads, even the great Manny Pacquiao. If Crawford decisively beats Canelo, don't tell me Manny Pacquiao is better.
If Crawford beats Canelo, that's the biggest win in boxing since Leonard beat Hearns. I'm Hagler. Would you agree?
Yeah.
All right, Jack, let's touch on a couple other things real quick that need to be addressed. Yes, Jack, one of my favorite fighters is fighting this week. Okay, Gervonta Tank Davis, 29-0, 24 knockouts, defends his WBA lightweight title against Frank Martin, 18-0, 12 knockouts at the MGM Grand Garden Arena. I like this fight, Jack. I don't think it's a whitewash like some people think. Not a blowout. Tank is a special talent. Martin is in his prime. I like what I see of Frank Martin as far as his boxing mind. He can box. He's got some power, but I will not pick against Tank. I think he's one of the top fighters in the game, and the fact that he surveys, he can get off great whenever he wants. He's explosive, power both hands, puts his punches together. He's just a dynamic fighter. I cannot pick against Tank. I will not say if it's a knockout or decision. I think Tank wins. I think it's a big fight, and I'm looking forward to seeing it. But I'm going to go with Tank to win, but might have a moment or two for Frank.
The question's this, Frank. Is Tank Davis ready to be taken? Because keep this in mind, he was on the house arrest. He wasn't living the life of a fighter for a while. It's easy to say, well, maybe he has a gym in his house. He was doing this, doing that.
It's not the same as fighting.
Another thing about Tank Davis, he does lose rounds during his fights before, his punching power and his ring IQ take over. I mean, even the Rally Romero fight, he nails Romero in the 7th round and stops him. But it was anyone's fight over 6 rounds. This is Rally Romero.
But I think he's like Crawford, Jack.
Perhaps. And even Ryan Garcia was a pretty competitive fight. Then he hits him the body shot. It's all over. I mean, Tank has the same mindset as Terence Crawford, the mindset of a winner. He knows he's going to get the job done. He's very confident. But
confident he can go get you.
But the question is, how good really is Frank Martin. I mean, he struggled in one of his recent fights. I think his last fight, he won a close decision, and
He
that
did.
doesn't bode well. You go against Tank Davis. If Frank Martin is truly an elite young fighter, let's say he is, Tank Davis is maybe primed for the taking in a big upset, like losing a close decision. I wouldn't be shocked, Frank, if Frank Martin wins, pulls out a close decision. I'm not picking Frank Martin to win. I'm not going to come back next Monday up, just as I predicted. I would have to think Tank Davis is going to win the fight on points, only because I don't want to overthink it. But I think it's going to be a tough fight. I
agree.
It's going to be a tough fight. It's going to be a very competitive fight, go the distance.
Martin's a great prospect, and he's got power.
Tank wins.
And he has a brain, too. He processes fast. He's a good boxer. He can mix it up. He can go forward. He can go backwards. I mean, this is no walk in the park for Tank. I just think the experience, I think Tank's ability to put the punches together, and he never panics. I just can't pick against all of that by a guy who hasn't been to the deep water like Tank has. And even though I think Martin is entering his prime, I'm not sure he's quite there yet. And if it's a competitive fight, even if he loses a decision, the best of him may still be down the road.
I see it being anyone's fight when we're in the 8th, 9th round, and you might be thinking Martin might be winning this fight, and I kind of feel Tank's power is going to break through late in the fight, maybe the 9th round or so. He'll drop Martin, hurt him, and that'll be the turnaround, And then you'll get a separation the last 2-3 rounds, and
that's part of the experience.
Right, and it won't be a disputed decision. Everyone will agree Tank won the fight, but it was in doubt, maybe going into the 9th or 10th round.
All right, so we both like Tank to win.
Yeah,
most likely by decision.
Yeah, that would be my feeling. Yeah.
On the undercard, your favorite fighter, David Benavidez, takes on Alexander. How do you say his last name? Vazik?
Vazik. Yeah. I have a hard time with it, but
in a light heavyweight bout. And look, Benavidez can't get Canelo. What do? You start beating up guys with a name that are bigger than him. And eventually Canelo is going to have to make a decision here with either Benavidez or Crawford or somebody big, or the public is going to start moving away from him a little bit. I like Benavidez in this fight. I think it'll look a little bit like the Bigger Beef fight. I think David Benavidez is a little too physical. I think he's on the surge. He's surging right now. Vosnik, it's like we saw against Peter Beef, and I know it's Peter Beef, but a rough and tumble guy like that, I think, is the ticket to beat him. I think Benavidez is going to win, and I think he's probably going to go for the stoppage. So he probably gets a late round stoppage. It should be an outstanding fight, and Benavidez is another guy, Jack, with all that's on the line and all the eyeballs that will be watching him. He has to step up and have a moment.
Yeah, I think Benavidez she'll get a stoppage in about 7 rounds or so. And let's forget the Canelo talk. I think the Saudis are realists as far as that goes. Their plan is to get Canelo and Crawford to fight, not Canelo and Benavidez.
So Benavidez fights the winner between Bivol and Peter Beef?
Exactly. And they're fighting in October, Beterbiev and Bivol, and I could see Benavidez being on their undercard, ready to take on the winner in another. And that would be a massive fight, whoever the winner is, especially if it's Beterbiev, because both guys would meet head on, and that would what a fight that would be. That would really be mouthwatering.
Oh, that would definitely be huge. Benavidez firework
has to make a statement to me this Saturday. Okay, I don't want a result where he wins a clear decision or anything like that. He's got to keep the momentum going like he's a destroyer, like no pun intended, like he's a tank, And let's see where.
And I think he's coming with that mindset, Jack, because he knows that. He's a smart guy. He knows that. All right, real quick, let's touch on two other things that we have to address. My favorite, Ryan Garcia, is in legal trouble again. What did he get? Vandalism, I think he was charged with, and his lawyers came out and they're not making a comment, and they're saying, you know what, withholds, we have all the evidence. Jack, I have no time for Ryan Garcia. I don't root for him. I think he's a punk. I think he's a drug cheat. And to me, he has replaced Adrian Broner as the guy who was the easiest to root against in the sport of boxing. I don't think much of Ryan Garcia, and I have no time for him, but we have to mention it. What do you say?
Unless he could prove, he was testing positive, wasn't a reality, really was negative, and he's not likely to prove that. The victory over Devin Haney should be taken away. It should be changed to a no contest. I mean,
I hope that happens.
If you're a drug cheat, I hold it against you. And I think they have to.
And he's talking about fighting Earl Spence. Did you see that?
Well, Spence is supposed to go in with Sebastian Fundora, the Towering Inferno. That's an intriguing fight. Actually, Spence and him. We don't know what Spence has left. He might be damaged goods. When you lose the way he did against Crawford, it takes something out of you mentally, that's for sure.
And that was almost a year ago, so at least he took time off. But I would have a hard time picking Spence against anybody close to elite because of the beating he suffered. You don't recover.
Ryan Garcia about one thing you criticized him on, okay? And before defending him, I'm going to mention for the second time what I said a minute ago. I think his victory over Devin Haney should be changed to a no contest. And I think he should be suspended a couple of years or whatever. Not a light suspension, a couple of years where he can't enter the ring and he can't fight, and the victory taken away.
It has to be at least 2 years.
And when he does come back, he should have to earn a world rating. He shouldn't just have one tune-up fight and then get thrown into a title match. He should,
that's what's going to happen.
A rule that you have to fight 4 times or something before you can be eligible to.
Good luck with that.
Yeah, right. That's not going to happen. But the one thing I do give him a pass on, which you didn't, and I absolutely give him a pass on it 100%, is him coming in 3.5 pounds overweight. And let me explain why. You're saying, well, how professional, how he got an edge, how he got that. Remember this. The Haneys, okay? Bill Haney and Devin Haney, two really dirty guys in the way they conducted business. Bill Haney said very clearly he was sending his son out to kill Ryan Garcia, and he was serious.
Just talk, Jack. Just talk.
No.
Wilder said that too. I don't care about that.
If that's just talk, anyone who makes any racial statement, any anti this statement, anti that statement, it's just talk. No, it's not just talk. You take it seriously because boxers have been dying in the ring. They've been getting hurt badly, and he's sending his son out to kill, Ryan Garcia. He says, look, if he dies, he dies. I can't be concerned with that.
Jack, I don't like that kind of talk.
Well, Cup, listen, once you do that, game on. Ryan Garcia can figure, okay, you want to kill me. I'm coming in strong. I'm not going to make weight. I'll pay the fine. You want to be dirty. And Devin Haney is a cheap shot guy. A cheap shot guy shoves opponents like Lomachenko during a stare down when they're no.
Another form of intimidation, Jack.
No intimidation. Okay. He's a punk, Devin Haney. A pure.
Well, that's what punks do. They try to intimidate.
And I'm going to tell you something. The Haneys got their comeuppance. They can give Haney back his title. They can take the loss off his record and tell him he's unbeaten. The Garcia beating he took is going to stay no matter what. He won't be able to get rid of that, getting knocked down 5 times, knowing he got beat up. He could spin it any way in his head. Oh, he had an extra 3.5 pounds. he was on a certain substance, it's going to stick with him. I praise Devin Haney for how hard he fought. He fought hard. He fought like a true champion in losing to Garcia, which is now going to be a no contest. I give him a lot of credit. He has the heart of a champion, Devin Haney, but the Haneys acted like complete punks, the two of them, and they got their comeuppance.
Jack, I agree with that, but I don't care about talk. Fighters say things all the time in the build-up for the fight to try to get an edge, like we're going to kill you or whatever, or pushing somebody to win. I don't care about that. This is what I know. Ryan Garcia never hid the fact that he didn't try to make weight, and Haney made the weight. I don't care if he was only there for 2 minutes and if he weighed 200 pounds on fight night. He went through the torture, the week to 10 days before the fight to make weight, and that's not overcome in 36 hours of hydration. I'm sorry. At least he's a pro and he made the weight, and I don't care what he said before the fight. They all say things to get the edge, so it doesn't bother me. Is he a punk? Yes, but he made weight, and he didn't cheat.
I understand what you're saying. Fighters say things. There's certain lines that you should never cross. There's certain things you should never say. There's certain things you should never do. I don't want to hear you want to get inside the guy's head, or the same thing that Ali used to call Frazier and Uncle Tom, a gorilla, imitate the way he talked and saying, "Oh, I just wanted to promote the fight." And
he admitted years later he was wrong about that, but that was his MO, Jack. Because he was fighting a guy who was not intimidated by him, and he was looking for an angle. Joe was the first guy that he was ever around, and he could sense that this guy doesn't fear me, he doesn't sweat me, he doesn't lose sleep over me, he doesn't look at me as being the alpha, and I need to find a way to try to break him. And his way was, gorilla, you're not smart, make fun of the way he talked. He admitted after that I shouldn't have done that, but that was my way of getting up for the fight and trying to sell it. We don't have to agree with it, but that's just the way it goes.
Yeah,
I have a hard time with that, Jack, because it's a tough sport.
Garcia, bottom line is this. Keep this in mind. Remember what I just said about Garcia. I think he should be suspended at least a couple of years, and he should have to earn a title shot in the future. Should have to have a few fights before he's allowed to fight for the title. You know what I saw at the Hall of Fame, Frank, that was interesting, and this was actually maybe good for boxing. Darrell Peoples wasn't there, the IBF president, but the other three sanctioning body presidents were sitting next to one another. Jose, WBC, WBA, and WBO, and they were getting along. It seems like the three of them, they'll work together. They'll have their own champions, but I don't think they're looking to sabotage one another now and going forward.
Jack, it's like the wrestlers that we see on TV. They come out and they do interviews. They want to kill each other. They all say that. Then we see them drinking backstage afterwards. You live in a world where you want everybody to get along and not say anything mean and not go below the belt. And I live in a world that I know those things happen, and I know that there are bad people out there, and they'll do things to get an edge no matter what it takes. And then the other thing, Jack, well, you don't think that Garcia should fight for 2 years, and he should have to fight more than one time before he gets a big fight, Jack?
Well, it's
2024. That's not happening. I can't entertain it.
I'm for 3 or 4 year suspension. If guys,
well, I'm for at least 2.
But you want to know something? Didn't Canelo test positive? And then we told, tainted meat, this, that, like a 6-month suspension.
And six months, right?
Right. We have no consistency. No consistency, Frank.
No, Canelo's a draw. He's
Garcia's a big ticket fighter now.
And that's going to go to his advantage, Jack, when the punishment comes down. I agree.
Yeah.
All right, Jack.
Okay.
What happens? What?
Just one thing. What happens if Garcia elects to say, okay, I won't fight for any titles. I'll just fight, and the Saudis will entertain him and give him the big money?
Nah, he shouldn't be allowed to fight. Should not be allowed to make income.
I agree.
If he wants to
Okay,
commentate,
Frank.
that's fine. He can't use his fist.
Okay, good show, Frank, tonight.
All right,
It's
Jack.
always a
Thanks
pleasure
everybody for
to
watching, and we will see you next week.